Okay, so last time I was starting to get into the differences between love and lovability and validation. So I've noticed there's several things in life that people always claim they want. They want love, they want the truth, they want free will, the freedom to choose, and they want justice. These are things that everybody keeps saying they want. What I found in general is people actually don't want these things. I might do a talk about just those four things and how people actually don't want them. Free will I covered in the previous series, somewhere around video 8 or 9, about how people often don't want free will because they want to be who they are. And who they are involves things, lifestyles or or beliefs that they don't want to change. And so they'll fall back on I can't help this because it's just who I am. I can't choose this. I can't choose this, it's just who I am. And that frees them from self-introspection, it frees them from judgment from others and from self, it frees them from the difficulty of self-improvement and self-discipline, because they can just shrug and say, yeah, I can't choose it, just who I am. So there's an example of that one. But people do the same thing with love. They say they want love, but often what they really want is validation or approval. And they're different. And we see this especially with a parent-child relationship, right? If you, as a parent, tell your kid that they can't just eat a whole bunch of candy and junk food, that they have to eat a real meal, and then you tell them they have to brush their teeth before they go to bed, and you tell them they have to go to bed by 9 o'clock, and your child gets angry at all these things and stamps their feet and says, you don't love me. We understand that the child is misdefining love. They are thinking that love is that which permits me to do what I want. Love is what allows me to make myself feel good. But as a wise parent, we know that what makes you feel good isn't necessarily what's good for you. And giving you what you want isn't always smart, because there's lots of things you want that I know is not very good for you. So we have to have our kids learn that we're not always going to get them what they want. And that's not because we don't love them, it's because we do love them. Unfortunately, when we grow up into adults, we often don't grow up fully. And we sometimes think like kids. And we think love is anyone who permits me and approves of my lifestyle, approves of my choices, approves of me and what I do. That's love. But if that's not good for you, then it's not love, is it? Now, they're not your parents. They don't have the right to command you to do anything or to discipline you for not doing it. They don't have any authority over you. But if they really cared about what was best for you, they wouldn't approve of some of the things that you do, perhaps. We see this a lot. I mean, some of the, I'm going to use less controversial examples that most people would agree are self-destructive behaviors. And that would be things like addictions. Right? We have lots of support groups for addictions, and we have even what they call interventions for addictions, because if you love someone and you see someone addicted, you want to get them out of that addiction. And yes, at the moment, when you do intervene and when you do try to confront the person, they're not going to be happy about it. They might be upset, they might call you names, they might think you're a jerk, you don't understand, blah, blah, and all these sorts of things. Well, that is an example of loving someone, in the sense that you do want what's best for them, and they're unable at the moment to see what's best for them. Or even if they can see what's best for them, they've just given up. They don't care. They're in too deep, and it's like, I know it's not good for me, but it's my life. And so they've given up. So why don't you give up on me too? I don't need your help. I use this as an example to show that Just because we grow up physically and become adults doesn't mean we don't still have that childish attitude of, if you loved me, you'd give me what I want. Or if you loved me, you'd care more about how I feel. But make no mistake, you can care about how someone feels, but still know their feelings aren't right. Their feelings aren't leading them in a good direction. Just because a drug feels good doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. Just because its behavior feels good doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. This is the trouble that we get into with our first definition of love. The second definition of love, the difficulty is it's not really love. It's usually a love of self, not a love of someone else. It's a desire for validation. It's feeding our ego and not our soul. It's the idea that we want to be lovable. We want to have a bunch of characteristics that people find attractive. It's not so much that we want them to care about our well-being. We just want them to notice us and to admire us and to think highly of us and that kind of thing, and want to be around us and things like that. So it shows that we're not really loving them either, right? Because what we're really wanting from them is their attention. We want them around because they make us feel good. And the problem with the first love is, if you do want what's best for someone, that's great, but how do you know what's best for them? And so I'm going to go back to the parent example on this. This is why parenting is such a difficult job, and it's very controversial. People have so many different ways, or disagreements about how to parent. And it might even not, it doesn't only just differ from parent to parent, it might differ from the firstborn to the secondborn, depending on their personalities. For example, I could have one kid that when they do wrong, I have to be very direct and kind of scold them about it. Because they seem to need that kind of direction. There's another kid that if they do wrong, I feel like scolding them won't help because they have an overdeveloped conscience and they scold themselves. They already feel bad. They're already questioning if they're a good person or not, and they're really hard on themselves. And so in that case, there's no need for me to be kind of hard on them because they're just piling on. They already feel bad. So I have to deal with that a little bit differently. Perhaps. And that's actually my point. I'm not even sure, right? No one is 100% sure about what's necessarily best. And we see that. Some parents will say, life is tough. I'm going to make my kids tough because life is tough. I'm going to prepare them for the world. And so they make their kids go through a few difficult things and try to problem solve and face their fears and all this whatever tougher parenting means. And their idea is that they think they're preparing their kids for a more successful venture out into the world. Another parent agrees entirely that the world is difficult. But their reasoning is, well, because the world is difficult, I want home to be the one place that isn't. I want home to be a refuge from the difficult world. I want home to be a place where they can rest and get a second breath and be ready to face the world because they're well rested, not because they're well tested. And you can argue who's right or who's wrong, but the point is it's very obvious that we could truly want what's best for our kids, but not actually know what's best for our kids. And it's not just for our kids, but it's also true for other people, and even for ourselves. Even if you want to love yourself, that's a common thing to say these days. You gotta love yourself. Whitney Houston said that was the greatest love of all. Learning to love yourself. I disagree, but if you do want to love yourself, that also means you're trying to do what's best for yourself. But we don't always know what's best for ourselves. That's why we have regrets. That's why we have, right? Because we made a decision that we thought was good, but maybe it wasn't, right? We're not sure when we should be afraid and actually think of that fear as a legitimate warning, or when our fear is overcoming us and it wasn't legitimately legitimate, and we just let an unreasonable fear or not so reasonable fear, keep us from something that would have been good. It's hard to know. Some fear is very legitimate. Sometimes things do look bleak, and the answer is to try something else. Sometimes the answer is to power through. We don't know. Most of the time, we don't know all the time, at least. So that's the problem with that definition of love is you can want what's best for someone. There's actually two problems. One, I can want what's truly good for this person. I truly want it. But one, I'm not sure what is actually good for them. And two, even if I knew it was good for them, I might not be equipped to give it to them. So there is a limitation there. Okay. So next time, we'll talk about how all these things are going to culminate in a conclusion. Well, I don't know, maybe not a conclusion, but towards a conclusion about, okay, so that's great. We've discussed that there's this kind of love and there's that kind of love, and validation is not the same as love, and there's a difference between unconditional love and conditional love, and so on and so forth. But what does that have to do with my soul? What kind of love does my soul need? What love should I be seeking? Or maybe it's not just I should be seeking love, maybe I should be loving too. Maybe that's the key, is not just that I should be seeking love, but I should be seeking to love. Maybe that's part of it. So we'll get into that in the next one.